more love, more joy, everything.
It's inspired young people.
Inspiration comes from within you. When you clear out the garbage that's in your mind, you then create space for something better, more beautiful to come in.
Let's have life and have it more abundantly.
I say yes.
It's like taking a workshop. I get to be in my pajamas.
We have a very active imagination, which is why it's important to learn how to harness it and then point it in the direction you want to go.
I listen to your show every day.
It's time now for Living Your Inspired Life with Susan Burrell. Susan is no-nonsense, inspirational, motivational, and fun.
This is positive talk radio.
Practical wisdom for everyday life.
It's a gift you give yourself.
Now, here's Susan.
And welcome to Living Your Inspired Life. You're listening to News Talk 1590 KVTA. I'm Susan Burrell, and I want to invite everyone, before we get started into the juiciness of today's discussion with our guest, I want to invite everyone to go to livingyourinspiredlife.org and get tuned in and tuned up to what we've already been talking about. The conversations already have been happening and pretty dynamically. So go and get caught up. You can listen whenever it is that you're free. You don't have to wait until we actually air our shows. That's the beauty of livingyourinspiredlife.org. So with that said, I want to welcome an author who's been a best-selling author for umpteen years, I guess I would say over 30 years, and he is. I'm such a huge fan. So without further ado, I want to welcome Richard Bach. Richard, thanks so much for being here with me.
Oh my goodness, what an introduction! Wonderful. Hi, how are you, Susan?
I'm good. Now, I have to tell everybody some of the books that you've written. So you've written Jonathan Livingston Seagull. A book called Illusions, which I shared with you before we started taping, is my candy. I just love it. And then you've written another book called A Bridge Across Forever, a book called One. I mean, you've written, how many books have you written? Probably over 30?
21.
21.
Yeah.
Okay, 21 books.
Yeah.
And I'm excited because there seems to be, we're going to talk about two books that you wrote at the beginning of your career that you have added to in a way. And both of those books you didn't think you were ever going to add to. One of them's Jonathan Livingston Seagull, and the other one is Illusions.
Right.
The Adventures of a Reluctant Messiah, but you've written now Illusions 2, The Adventures of a Reluctant Student.
That's right.
And so let's talk, which one do you want to talk about first, Richard?
Well, we can talk about Seagull because there were 4 parts of Jonathan Livingston Seagull when it was written, but when it was time to publish it, I said, "Oh, we don't need this 4th part. It really doesn't apply." And the way I saw it, it just wasn't necessary. And I thought the whole thing was thrown away. And about a year ago, my very, very good friend Sabrina found it, and she said, "Have you seen this?" And I said, "No, I haven't seen it. What's that?" And she said, "It's the 4th part of Jonathan Seagull." And I read it. And I said, "Oh my goodness, times have changed." And we sent that to the publisher, and she thought it was wonderful. And so it's been published now, and in Kindle.
Yes.
And it will be, I think, in October it'll come out in the printed version.
Well, the thing I love about Jonathan Livingston Seagull, now that I'm older and wiser and have life experience to really understand what you were saying, is that it's about freedom, but freedom from the old ways of being. It's part of the theme that we've been talking about this month, Richard. I should have caught you up at the beginning. Yeah. We've been talking about finding the new normal, and I think that's what this Jonathan Livingston Seagull, and then adding the 4th piece, kind of puts the button on. Is that there is a new normal out there for everybody, and it's not doing things the old way. It's about practicing and exploring. Yes.
Exactly right. Yes.
And then not buying into what other people say should be your truth.
if other people want to do something, that's absolutely fine for them. But unless there's a harmonic within us that says, this is my highest right, it's not for us. We have our own inner sense of the way we ought to live and the way we should express life through our own. And that's for us to do, not for someone else to do.
Right. And I think that we've been indoctrinated, I will use that word, indoctrinated into believing that there is somebody outside of me that has authority over me. And if I can just find that person to tell me what to do, my life will be perfect.
That's so true. That's so true. But then we discover, at some point in our life, we discover that voice comes from within us.
Yeah.
It will give us suggestions. If we're creative people, it will say, here's a movie, here's a book, here's a dance, here's a song, whatever it is, it'll sing to us. And we have to take a while and recognize it really is for us. It's not for somebody else to do. And so there's a test in our life that says, do I really want to go out on this plank and try it, because I don't think there's any money in it, and maybe I should not do it. But this quiet little voice says, do it. This is your destiny. Do it.
Do it anyway.
And so we do it, and sure enough, we have difficult times. And there's no money, there's no recognition, whatever there is. But at some point, it happens, and it tells us you did the right thing. And tests like that just come over and over and over in our lives. And sometimes the tests that come are even more difficult. I often think that we mortals are so brave to choose lifetimes in space and time, because we have that amnesia of our total life, our spiritual life, and we're just sitting here on what looks to be a planet with all kinds of terrible things coming toward us and so forth. What bravery we have to do that? And, and after a time, we recognize that there is a principle that guides us, and we don't have to worry about the money. It will take care of us somehow, one way or another. It will, as long as we're singing the song that we've been born to sing.
I so appreciate you saying that, because, and I love in your writing, first of all, everyone that's listening, you have got to get one of Richard's books, because the way you write, Richard, is very philosophical, poetic, but to the point. I can't even believe how many times I read one of your books and I get a zowie right between the eyes or in my heart. I'm like, wow, that was, just one sentence in one of your books, and I can chew it over for hours going, wow, that was really interesting. Wow, I have to think about that.
That's so, I want to say that it's so strange, because there's relatively few people who have that feeling. Most people, I think, just kind of look at what I write and they say, this guy is crazy. And they go on to another book. And I'm aware of that. I'm aware that there's a certain family on this planet, and it goes through all the countries of all the world. And there's a few people there who say, oh, I understand this. I've lived this too. And it's that family that is so important to me. The end of this month, the 31st, we're starting JonathanLivingstonSeagull.com for just that purpose, just to say, if we feel that we're pretty lonely, here's a place we could go where a lot of people have the same ideas, who have melded to the ideas that are expressed in Jonathan. And we'll see what happens. Maybe it won't work at all. But that's what we wanted. We want to say, you're not alone. So many of us feel sometime or another in our lives that we're just desperately alone, that somehow our true family has left us on this planet, and they've gone off into other stars and left us here.
Yeah.
But that's not true. They left us here because we have something to say, a life to express our sense of life, our life that's a journey for other people, and sometimes it's really scary stuff that we do. This last thing for me was the crash of the airplane. I never wanted to have a crash, I didn't think. But it turned out to be an absolute blessing for me.
So, Richard, let me just catch people up to speed in case they haven't read your books. And I invite everybody that's listening to at least go get Jonathan Livingston Seagull or Illusions, the current ones that are out. So you were an Air Force pilot, and then flying has been your thing for your entire life, and you've actually built your own planes, yes?
That's correct, yes.
So
I've always loved flying, yeah, sure.
So speak about the planes, your experience of the crash now, because that was in a plane that you actually built, yes?
It was one that somebody else built. It was a home-built airplane. I built a little airplane a long time ago. But this one is a little seaplane, and it's just a marvelous airplane. And I've flown it a lot. I got it in Florida, and flew it in Florida, and then flew across the country here to Washington State. And it's a joyful little machine. And then about a year and a half ago, I was landing in a little farmer's field there, and for some reason, first time in my life, I didn't notice that there were wires right on the final approach, and a strange thing happened. For me, from my point of view, I had a beautiful landing. I settled down right next to the grass, and I could hear the leaves of grass flickering against the wheel just before it touched. And then suddenly everything went black. And I thought, I thought I was flying, but I guess this is a dream. And it was, the blackness was as if someone had a visor of black plastic that they put in front of me. I said, okay, well, I'll just wait for my dream to finish part two.
Uh-huh.
And part two, all of a sudden, I was in a completely different world. I was 1,500 feet, it seemed like, about 1,500 feet above this beautiful land. And here was a little village, and I remember there were some children who were playing some kind of game, and one little child was running around the circle, and it was something I don't remember vaguely from my childhood. I remember something like that, but it's still unclear. And this place was suffused with love. It was just amazing. And I said, what's happening here? I'm not quite sure what's happening. And nobody was there. I was in what looked like a floating room up in the sky. And somebody said, I couldn't see him, but I heard them in my mind, do you want to go to your life on Earth? Do you want to go back to that? And I thought about that. Oh, well, of course. I'm dreaming. And yeah, sure, I think so. But this is really interesting. And then the question came again, do you want to go back? And I said, well, I think so. And the third time, it said, do you want to go back? And I said, yes. And instantly, all of a sudden, that whole scene was gone. And I blinked my eyes and opened them. I was in a hospital.
Wow.
What's going on here? And my friend Sabrina was there. She had been with me all day. She said, it's been 7 days, Richard. You've been in a coma for 7 days. I said, oh, my God. And then I recognized that my voice wasn't working very well because they had put something down my throat, I guess. I could breathe. And I said, well, it's time for us to go. I mean, do you have a car here? And he said, well, I don't think it's really time to go because you've got wires, hoses into your body and all that kind of stuff. And I thought for a minute, and I said, well, can we get a cab? I really wanted to get out of there. Unfortunately, I was there for several months. And she did a beautiful thing. She said, the truth is, you are a perfect expression of perfect love here and now. There will be no bad effects of this event.
Richard, let me say that again so everybody can hear it again because it's so powerful. She said to you, you are a perfect expression of perfect love here and now, and there is no, what was it?
There's no effects. You will have no permanent effects.
There will be no permanent effects. You are a perfect expression of love here and now, and there will be no permanent effects. I love that because...
So true. And the amazing thing, and I've done a little bit of visualization in the past in my life, but this one, I said it too. I said it over and over and over, and she said it over and over, and the doctors would look at us and say, well, hey, don't you see this guy is really wrecked, and he's probably going to die, and all that sort of thing. And we said no, and we just said that, and I felt that just for the seconds that it took me to say that sentence. I felt it. I knew that was true. And
not that you were going to die, but that you were a perfect expression of love.
Absolutely.
Got
a
it.
Perfect expression of love. Absolutely. And I don't know what the mechanics of that are, but when our mind has a beautiful idea and it's reminded over and over and over, it seems to express that in our actual physical body. And there were all sorts of things. The doctors first told Sabrina, they didn't tell me. They said, first, he may die, so be ready for that. Second, he may never walk again. He may never speak again. If he reads a book, he will not understand it. They went on and on with this stuff about some kind of traumatic brain injury I had, something like that. And she said, no. She said, that is not true. That is not true. And sure enough, when I finally got out of the hospital, I just desperately wanted to come to my home again. And finally, I wasn't thriving. I think that was the term they used. There's a lack of thriving in the hospital because I had stopped eating. I just didn't want them to eat anymore. So they said, okay. They said to Sabrina, they said, all right, you can take him to a hospice. And she said, not to a hospice. He's going home. And they said, okay, he's going to home. And as soon as I got here, I learned how to stand. I learned how to take a few steps. I'd be very, very tired. My belief that I was tired. But then the next day, I would take a whole lot more steps, and it just kept going that way. And at one point, I got into street clothes again, and I was outside, and I was walking with the dogs, and it just got better and better. Then I went to Florida, where the little airplane Puff had been rebuilt. All this wreckage that she was in, I shipped back to a person who built it, and I got my test from the FAA, showing I could fly the airplane perfectly. And finally he said, okay, she's ready. And I went down to her, and fortunately the owner and my friend who had flown me there, they stayed away, and they let me have time with little Pop, and I cried a lot.
Yeah.
And it was so beautiful to see her perfect, because some months after I was home, I could walk around, and the fellow who rebuilt the airplane had come to the west. And I said, "Can you look at Puff and see, is there any hope that she can fly again?" And he came over here, and we walked into the hangar. was looking like a morgue there because she was just in pieces then on what was left of her was on the concrete. And he looked around, and for about 5 minutes he didn't say a word. And finally he said, I've had worse than this. And I said, what do you mean you can? And he said, of course I can rebuild her. You put her in a truck, put all the pieces in the truck, send it to me, and of course she'll be perfect. And that happened. And there are lots of things that happened along the way. But finally that day came when I flew Little Puff again after the crash, after all this stuff, and it was absolutely wonderful. It was as if you had a dear friend who had died, and then a few months later he was perfect again. and I liked that experience. And I learned so much about what dying is. For so many of us here on this planet, death is a tragedy.
Yeah.
But for the person itself, the person we think is dying, it isn't that at all. It's life. It's a kind of joyful homecoming. We don't see it, they see it. And this strange thing where we feel we should be grieving for them,
Yeah.
well, they should be grieving for us because they have such joy. And I felt that when I was there. That very brief little near-death experience for me was just an amazing thing to see how much love there was there all around us. And we think we're separated from it when we're here. We're not really separated, but we believe that we're separated. We believe that we're lost little creatures, and we only live for a few years, and then we're gone into oblivion. None of that is true. And for me, for the first time, to actually experience that was a wonderful event.
So,
and I stopped thinking of it as an accident and thought of it as it's my own recognition of what's true. It's a joyful event, and I still feel that way.
that's an amazing story, Richard, because it not only brings hope to my heart, but also when you were describing the experience of rebuilding your airplane Puff and seeing her complete, it sounded like she became your mirror to see yourself. That the work, the practice you had done, the work you had done to recover yourself or actually rebuild yourself was made apparent when you got to see your airplane too.
What a wonderful insight that is. Thank you, Susan. Thank you. I never thought of it that way, but absolutely you're right.
Yeah, I mean, there's like, that's the, and then, I just got chills. And then together, you both, because I read allusions to The Adventures of a Reluctant Student, and there was the commitment to rebuild, but doesn't necessarily, you were building anew on a new foundation of a deep experience of love and connection to your airplane, to yourself, to all the other characters you re-met during this process.
Yeah, that was so true. Something happened. There's a lot that I don't remember about the 7 days that I thought I was gone for 15 minutes or half an hour, something like that. So all the rest of this, I don't really remember. But I do recall that it was, I must have given a promise at that other level that I will rebuild Puff. And that was desperately important for me to do that. And as you said, that was an expression of rebuilding my life too, so that the life that I had with her, lots and lots of hours flying with her all across the country, all of that was not lost. It was there. It was just a continuation of the life that we had. And that was a wonderful experience.
And that's what some of what you describe in your book as well, Richard, is that life is a continuation. That's some of what you saw and felt when you were floating in those 7 days.
Sure.
Yeah.
And it was, there were so many things that happened. So much. I came from this experience with no question about this world. This world is fiction. It changes with space and time. Things that seem very real in a few days or a few months, they can be radically changed. And the one thing that's true is love. That's the one powerful, infinite power of this whole universe. And we can express that in this life, or we can choose not to. It doesn't make any difference. Love is always there and always more powerful than anything. And the example is when we die. Because I've been flying airplanes my whole life, I've had some experiences where I see someone that I knew very well. All of a sudden there's an explosion, there's fire, and then they're gone. And for a long time I was thinking, oh my God, what a terrible way to die, and that sort of thing. And just a few weeks ago, I met someone, a young woman, who had been, she was going to marry her fiancé, and he was killed in a crash. And for several years, he had thought, that was terrible for that to happen. And at last, I was able to say it wasn't terrible for him. It was a joyful, joyful life. And he never felt the fire. He didn't feel the explosion at all. All of a sudden, it was as if he was dreaming, and then he was in this beautiful place. And I wish there were a way that you could be in touch. And of course, there is a way that we can all be in touch with people who have gone on before us. And that seemed to be part of the mission. Part of why I had this event was to tell other people in a book or sometime, maybe right now, somewhere in your audience, there's one person who really needs to be reminded that that's a beautiful experience, that death experience is beautiful. And not to grieve for them at all. And the same will be true for us someday. And that's a lot of what I've learned.
Yeah, I so appreciate you sharing that with us, Richard. I want to shift gears a little bit and talk about what I call principles, the spiritual principles that you talk about in your book, Illusions, as well as Jonathan Livingston Seagull. And some of why I loved these books when I read them 30 years ago, and why I love rereading them, is that you, in a very fun way, explain that if we practice love, if we practice seeing the world differently, then we can definitely overcome our limitations, whether it's a physical gravity limitation, right? Like Jonathan Livingston Seagull learned how to fly beyond anybody's imagination. And in Illusions, you talk about in the adventures of a reluctant Messiah, and then in the adventures of a reluctant student, which I love those phrases, because I'm so reluctant. I go kicking and screaming when when the universe says, this is where you need to turn left. I go, no, I'm not doing it. You can't make. I'm a redhead, so I tend to be resistant to things.
Yes.
But so in those in Illusions, you also talk about that. The idea that anybody can practice changing their reality if their belief is strong enough in the thing that they really can't see in time and space.
That's so true, except for one word.
Okay.
They can't change their reality. The reality is love, period. no space, no time, love, and us as an expression of it. Everything else is fiction. This whole world is fiction. This body that's here right now, and that maybe in a couple hundred years won't be here, that's not us. That's a fiction. And for us to live our highest sense of right, what you were saying, to learn these things and to live it, that's a good reason for living, to have this recognition that we are expressions of love in the highest way. It takes a long time, at least it took a long time for me, to recognize that idea in the first place, and then gradually begin to practice it. And practice is so important, as you well know. And there'll be tests. There will be very difficult times that will come for us to say, "Oh, that's not true." You're going to be crushed by space and time. You say, "Okay, space and time is a fiction. It's not the truth. It's not the eternal love that exists, and that I am an expression of it." And you just, and as you say these things, all of a sudden your life seems to change too. There's such a thing. I call it the principle of coincidence.
I love it.
It's always as we think these things, a coincidence will come right from left field. I have no idea where it came from, but it brings us along, one way or another. It will be a place where we meet someone who may deeply impress our lives, or we'll see an idea, or all kinds of ways that coincidences can work with us, and it helps to recognize that. I have no idea what's going to happen to me in the next month, but there's going to be a coincidence that is going to be sail me along my way.
I have a quote from your book, The Reluctant Student, The Adventures of a Reluctant Student, and you said, when the mortal sought understanding, the master offered ideas spoken through coincidence in the language of events and the adventures of life.
Oh.
And I love that you said that. I was like, yeah, I get it.
Yeah.
Because I think when the bad stuff happens,
yep.
and this is going back to trying to find a new normal, but when the bad stuff happens, we always want to revert to the way it was because that's more comfortable, even though the way it was may not be so great.
Yep.
But let me go back to the way it was, and we aren't really present to the idea that these experiences or adventures, as you put them, are really for us to move closer to our highest truth and become more aware of the oneness that we are, the love that we are.
Absolutely right. And this is a good experience right now. I haven't met you before, but right now there's this wonderful coincidence that we've met and
yes.
that we're talking together. What's going to happen from this? I have no idea, except that I know this is a wonderful talk, and it's true for all the events that come to us. They're little coincidences that touch us and that can move us and can soar us way into the sky with the joyful recognition that we are being guided by some principle there, which we don't necessarily understand, but it's there, it's working for us, and it's always working for the better. I learned in this experience that even if you die, that's a joyful event. That we cannot possibly lose because there is this wonderful recognition of love, always and forever, the most powerful event in anyone's life. And as we recognize that, we begin to see little coincidences of here it is, here's another expression, here's another. And we recognize that we are giving a gift of our experiences. And sometimes the most difficult experiences we have will touch someone else in such a way that they'll be transformed. And you'll say, did I do that?
Right. Well, I want to share something because that some of it's a little bit of what I shared with you before we went on air. I am going through a divorce, and for many people, myself included, it feels like a death, and when when in the process of something ending like that, that's so powerfully done, like a death. There's a grappling with, okay, then who am I now? And this is not going to end. I'm sure you must have felt that sitting in the hospital. When am I going to get out of here?
Exactly right.
And the thing that in all the little bumps and grinds going through this process, I get to those deep places, dark places where I think it's never going to end and I'm never going to get out of the pit of despair and everything. And when I was in a place like that just last week. And then part of what I've been practicing is being love. And my affirmation has been, I live and move in an atmosphere of love.
Wonderful.
So that my breath is love, and where I go, love precedes me, and where I leave, love is there. And
Wonderful.
I had forgotten in the yuckiness of the process.
Yeah.
Or the adventure of life, as you like to put it, I had forgotten that that's the truth. That's the highest truth. And the appearance or the experience is the thing that's growing me into a deeper acceptance or experience, or I don't even know what, Richard, an embodiment of oneness and love. And I'm grateful for the experience now.
It's so true. And if you didn't have these really difficult times and discover that within you there's something that says, I am holding to this truth no matter what.
No matter what.
I am an expression of love, and it will be reflected all about me, even when it's not true to our eyes. That's where the power happens, that something is happening within our whole spirit. And after it will change the event, and believe me, there will be an end for you for this time, and there will be a glorious reason why this part of your life, which has become difficult, is just being wiped off, and in that place will something beautiful will come for you. You don't need to know what it is, but it will happen. And if we have this conversation 1 year from now, you'll be able to say, and the most amazing thing, I met this person or these events happened to me, and they turned out to be beautiful, and they never would have happened before had I stayed in that marriage.
Well, thank you. Thank you for that. And what I got to say is, as we're talking, I also am hit with the realization that it takes, and you said this earlier in our discussion, that it takes a lot of courage and strength to be here on planet Earth, going through the adventures of life and finding our highest truth. It takes a lot of courage and strength.
It absolutely does. And as we do that, as we say, I do not care what my eyes are seeing, I care about what my spirit is whispering to me. As we do that, it works, and the events that seem to be in space and time in front of us change and become something much more in line with the ideals that we live for.
Okay, I just fell off there, because what you're saying is if we practice this, then the events will change right before our eyes.
Yes, they will.
Okay, so let's talk about that, because it's like a foundational principle that you discuss in a lot of the books that you've written that I've read, that there is that place where you can change your perception or something like that, right?
Absolutely, and that's an interesting thing, that there's been a thread through all the books. I think I'm writing a new book, but really it's just an expression of the whole theme. And that theme is just as you said. As we hold something in our thought, we'll see it reflected in our experience. And sometimes the change from one to another is a difficult time. But we hold to our highest right, no matter what, and it changes. Like when I was in the hospital, and Sabrina told me, they're telling me these things about how you'll never be able to read, you'll never be able to understand. They said you'll be able to read Jonathan Seagull, but he will have no idea what it means. All of that was nonsense. It was a suggestion. It's like a hypnotist suggestion.
Right.
And I could accept it, or I could say, no, I do not accept that. That is not true for me. And sure enough, it wasn't true for me. And I'm flying airplanes and reading it off, and all my life is the same as it was, or better than it was.
Oh, I'm so thrilled for you. I'm so thrilled, Richard. And thank you for saying that, because in my personal process, this is what I noticed after going through this last little roundabout, is when I begin to listen to what other people's experience is, that's when I get down into the depths, the pit of despair type of thing, because I begin to believe somebody else's experience, and it does not have to be my experience.
It's so true.
Yeah.
Absolutely true.
And you've proven it. You've absolutely proven it by coming back stronger and rebuilding yourself and reflecting that out into your world with rebuilding your airplane and getting back in the air. I think that's if the thing I would want most from the listeners of Living Your Inspired Life to really take home and digest is the idea that principle is not bound by precedent, that whatever happened before does not make that so for everyone. It may be one person's experience, but because we can choose to turn our attention to our highest truth, we don't have to live other people's experiences. We can live our own experience.
Absolutely right. Beautifully said. Beautifully said.
Okay, so I have another quote from from your travels with Puff, because it caught my attention, probably because of what I'm personally going through, because, of course, it's always all about me, right?
Oh, yes.
So this is what you said. You said, there is no freedom without independence, no freedom without shattering the chains of someone else pushing, forcing, deciding my life against my will. Freedom's not living as someone says I must, but living true to my unchained spirit.
Wow.
How dynamic. Did you? I think that's dynamic. I love that that's what's so.
Oh.
Because I believe it's so.
Yeah. And as it's so, it will be reflected. It may take a little while in space-time to happen, but sure enough, it will happen.
So let's talk a little bit about the space-time thing, because you use that a lot. And for people that maybe don't know what that really means, let's define it.
That's what we call the physical world around us. And it's so easy to say that the reality around us, but it isn't real at all. And I've learned so much now about the fiction of what this is. We can change it in a thought. Any of us can be wherever we are right now, looking out a window and seeing a city or seeing a prairie or whatever. If we decide to change that, it will be gone within a matter of hours. And so it is with the events, too, not just the surroundings, but the events in our lives, too. If we feel that we've been surrounded by difficult times and that the world is really no good for us, and we change our thinking about that, that's going to change too. all of a sudden the world will be a kind of heaven for ideas around us. And that changeability, that's our life.
So I love this. I love that you're saying all this. And can we bring it down to can we bring it down to earth, Richard, in terms of the time space? Because I work with lots of people that really believe that the circumstance in their life, and that happens to me too, that the circumstance in our lives is the reality, is the truth. And there's so many people on the planet right now that are looking at the experience of the economy and thinking that's real, or the Obamacare and thinking that's real, or politics, or religion, or what, and they think that that's real. How would you speak to those? How can we talk to those people so that they can really begin just one little step at a time practicing this, besides the affirmation of
something that
love?
I did about that was turn off the television. And I not only turned it off, I took it out of the house.
Oh, wow.
I haven't looked at I've looked at the computers, but never that sense of news. When they like to have something that's bad news and that sort of thing, I just don't hear it. I'm not aware of it, and I like my life that way. Other people would say, "Oh, I can't live without the news." Right now, we've got a news that takes anywhere in the world and puts it into our living room. But I don't care about what's happening that far away. I'm caring about the world that I feel, the world that the lives that I can touch. That's what I care about. I'm not here to save anybody except myself, right?
Right.
And as I do that, and as other people do that, I'll watch them and say, "Oh, well, that's a good choice," and I'm going to do that too.
So the things I'm hearing, so what I heard you just say, Richard, is to not. This is I practice this too. I don't watch the news, whichever modality of news is out there. I really don't, because what I find is I begin to believe that.
Yeah.
Instead of what is the highest truth. And then the other thing you were saying is start right where you are. Start with your immediate circle of lives that you can touch and love and support and help.
Absolutely right.
Those are great. Those are two great tools, Richard. I so appreciate that you said that. And the other thing, okay, we have about 5 minutes left. So I'm trying to decide what's the most important thing, Richard Bach. What is it we can end with? Although I would like to end with the story that opens Illusions. I will tell you that. But so out of all of this, here's what I know I want to say. Part 4 of Jonathan Livingston Seagull that you added, it was interesting because you said earlier that you didn't, when you originally wrote it, you felt like it just needed 3 parts and part 4 wasn't necessary. And then when I read part 4 in the book that just came out, I understood why it wasn't included in the first book. And I think it's because 30 years ago, the awareness, the consciousness, if you will, on the planet wasn't ready for the part that you were talking about, which is about going back into separation, of recognizing that the master teacher, if the master teacher isn't there, then I can't learn.
Yeah.
And if the master teacher isn't there, then the teachers that learned with the master teacher, when they all die away, it reverts or it moves to this place of ritualism or dogmatism or even just a bunch of gossip stories about what the master teacher taught, which wasn't even what he was teaching.
That's
or
right.
or she was teaching.
Yeah.
So, and that's why, and I think it's timely now that people need to I think they're awake enough to go, let me think about that.
Well, it's interesting. We'll see what happens. Maybe people will read it. Maybe they won't read it.
Well, okay, and so let's talk about, so you're going to start a website called JonathanLivingstonSeagull.com. And is that a place where people can blog or connect up and talk about these ideas?
Yes, yes, indeed. There's a couple of people who really know about computers and that sort of thing. They're very, very good.
Mm-hmm.
And that's happening right now. It will be online on the 31st. And there's just going to be people's stories about how they touched the ideas of Jonathan Seagull and what happened to them. I got a postcard once from a fellow who had been an ad executive, Madison Avenue in Manhattan, and he had read Jonathan and said, I don't like this life. I'm going to change it. He always wanted to sail a little boat. He got a little boat, and he was going to sail it around the world. He sent me a postcard from Portugal.
Oh, wow.
He had gotten that far. And I never heard from him again. I don't know. All he said was that I'm living the life that I want to do. And it was a radical choice for him, but it was the perfect choice for him. And the same thing is true for us. We all have whatever we love to do. That's our path. Follow that path, no matter what. There's something I read this the other day in the computer of someone who had always wanted to be a mermaid, and now she's called Mermaid Melissa.
Oh,
where she has learned to hold her breath for 5 minutes underwater.
My goodness!
And she's got a little company now, and so you think if somebody loves to do that, how could it possibly happen to her? Well, now it's her life.
My goodness!
She's doing all kinds of stuff.
Oh, my goodness. So, Richard Bach, I, again, to just gush a little bit more, am so grateful for everything you've written, every single word, and I'm so grateful that you're still around flying the skies so that you can continue to write more and inspire people. And I want to encourage everybody to go to JonathanLivingstonSeagull.com and share your transformative story, your story of freedom and flight. And Richard, I want to end with this story that starts illusions, if you will indulge me.
Sure.
Okay. Once there lived a village of creatures along the bottom of a great crystal river. The current of the river swept silently over them all. Young and old, rich and poor, good and evil, the current going its own way, knowing only its own crystal self. Each creature in its own matter clung tightly to the twigs and rocks of the river bottom, for clinging was their way of life, and resisting the current, what each had learned from birth. But one creature said at last, I'm tired of clinging. Though I cannot see it with my eyes, I trust that the current knows where it's going. I shall let go and let it take me where it will. Clinging, I will die of boredom. The other creatures laughed and said, Fool! Let go and that current you worship will throw you and tumble you, smash you across the rocks, and you will die quicker than boredom. But the one heeded them not, and taking a deep breath, let go, and at once was tumbled and smashed by the currents across the rock. Yet in time, as the creature refused to cling again, the current lifted him free from the bottom, and he was bruised and hurt no more. And the creatures downstream, to who he was a stranger, cried, See, a miracle! A creature like ourselves, yet he flies. The Messiah, come to save us all. And the one, carried in the current, said, I am no more Messiah than you. The river delights to free us. If only we dare let go. Our true work is this voyage, this adventure. But they cried the more, Savior, Savior, all the while clinging to the rocks. And when they looked again, he was gone, and they were left alone, making legends of a Savior. Richard Bach, thank you so much for today. And I'm just going to say, and so it is, namaste.